I was going to say that anyway with a bigger crowd or a smaller crowd. It's just my meeting that I use each time. And what it basically says, in greeting and acknowledging each and every one of you, our unifying voice is learning and understanding Maturanga. And I was hoping that with the crowd here tonight, we get a better understanding of that very complex concept of security, which I think many people think is really about spies and terrorists. But in fact, if you watch the news tonight, there's a massive cyber attacks going on in petrochemical and pharmaceutical companies, which apparently started in Ukraine, and I was therefore intrigued that Russia also got a bit of it as well. But it's in the United States, it's in the United Kingdom, it's across the world. And this particular kind of attack seems to be a very frequent and high-risk security problem. Now, we might think in New Zealand we're quite secure because we're far away from everything. But indeed, people could attack our power network and we would all lose our electricity like that. So the first thing we were going to do when we had a big crowd here was to introduce the topic, which I've done very briefly, but also to show you a little video, a 2-minute video that actually puts the CDSS in context, and after that I would introduce the speaker who...
Yeah, somewhere there.
Oh, yes.
He just left.
I was going to introduce Rouben, so I'll go ahead and do that, but before we do that particular stage, I would like you to watch the video, please.
He's everywhere.
Definitions of security vary. For some people, security means being safe from, prosecution or just being physically safe. For other people or societies, the security is more about being free to say things without being prosecuted or punished for that. Today, security is about making sure our environment is clean and secure. It's about keeping our oceans clean. For some countries, climate change is their #1 security problem. If climate change is not tackled, some of them will go under the water. We will lose some nation states. It's about making sure our food is reliable. It's about making sure that migration flows help countries economically and not undermine them. The other significant challenges to security and safety are such phenomena as human trafficking or biosecurity or the geopolitical transition, especially in the Asia-Pacific. With the rise of China, we're still trying to answer the question, is the rise in China good or beneficial to the region, or is it going to destabilize the security in the Asia-Pacific? Security today is much more complex because we live in a much more globalized, interdependent society. It is now not just about how secure you feel, but it's also about seeing and watching how others deal with security or suffer under insecurity. And that is because we are exposed to 24/7 media coverage. It may not directly affect you or your society, but we are all humans. We care about each other. There are certain values we follow. We live in a different world today. But it doesn't mean that the world has become more secure. In the early 90s, a lot of people thought that after the end of communism, we will be all living in a very safe and secure and peaceful world. It didn't happen. Navigation through security threats is not something that can be done single-handedly. Not even the most powerful agency organization can handle that. That requires collaborative, integrated approach and participation of experts, academic institutions. Theory is great, but we also need to make sure that our security studies are related to the real-world security challenges, that we work together with security practitioners to make sure that our world and society is safe and we are comfortable in this new 21st century.
Thank you for attending.
That's the speech. Well, then what I was going to do was to introduce Professor Rouben Azizian, who some of you may not know, took up his appointment in December 2015, and some of you may also not know that Rouben came from some 30 years as the director of the Asia Pacific
Center for Security.
Yep, in Honolulu, which is a, let's just say, US government-funded academic entity. What possibly not so widely known is that Rouben had undertaken and completed a PhD at the University of Auckland, and you were teaching there for some years too.
Political Studies. Yeah. I was with the Political Studies, University of Auckland.
Yes. What is not so widely known is that Rouben actually was in the diplomatic service for the United Soviet Socialist Republic. And he has served as a diplomat in various parts of the embassies that Russia had, the USSR had at that time. What is even less widely known is that he was the ambassador to Russia, USSR, in New Zealand. And I understand on reliable sources that he was the person who pulled the flag down at the embassy when the USSR collapsed. So that's the man who's now going to address us tonight, and his subject is something you've seen him talking about already. That was just an oeuvre. What is security, but particularly with reference to Aoteoroa, New Zealand, because there is a sense in which many New Zealanders, as Rouben I think was suggesting in that 2-minute video, don't really fully understand how complex and I call it labile this concept is. It just keeps growing and growing and growing as it encompasses the lives of all of us. So, Professor Rouben Azizian.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, do you want me higher or lower? Higher. Thank you very much, Greg, for this very generous introduction. I always get emotional when people remind me of my glorious past. And I hope I can do something important, useful in my next years of work and activity. I'm also very pleased to be with Massey University and the Center for Defense and Security Studies for a number of reasons. When I was in Honolulu and I traveled basically all over Asia Pacific, if people discussed New Zealand with me, it was obviously about All Blacks or Peter Jackson, and then followed very often by Massey University. I think the awareness of Massey University is quite significant in the Asia Pacific, especially with the people I usually had interactions with, from senior government people and senior security sector, defense, and that is because Massey and Center for Defense and Security Studies have graduated and educated a large number of defense and security sector personnel, and that is done by through our partnership with the Brunei Command and Staff College and the New Zealand Command and Staff College. So that applied nature of Massey and the Center for Defense and Security Studies was very much appealing to me, and that's why I was quite excited to join Massey. Betrayed University of Auckland. That's what I do. I'm a chronic defector. I was born in Armenia. I moved to Russia. Then I dumped Soviet Union. I moved to New Zealand, and I got bored with New Zealand, with the University of Auckland. I went to Hawaii, and I'm back to Massey. So, and I defected from Auckland, as some of you appreciate, and that's because life is so exciting, and I'm restless because there are so many opportunities around. So, and security is one of them. So, as Graham said, security is one of those terms and words which is very much misunderstood, misperceived, misinterpreted. So when people think security, they get a little anxious and concerned. But I mean, security can also mean opportunity. Security is also open doors to some collaboration and interaction and more trust. If you can discuss security with neighboring countries, with other partners, that means the highest level of trust. I mean, I'm not particularly referring to the Five Eye. Some of us are aware of the Five Eye arrangement, right? Even at the worst times of US-New Zealand relations were really quite sour, this Five Eye agreement continued. So to me, it meant that despite the difficulties and the challenges of the anti-nuclear policy, there was still a certain level of shared values, if you want, or shared national interests, or shared strategic objectives that remain. And so security is not just something that we should fear, but it is something that we can look forward to in terms of opportunities. So the other word and term I'd like to try to rehabilitate and clarify is diplomacy, because of my background and how connected with security. So there is also this perception that all that diplomats do is spy. So if you work in an embassy, you are definitely a spy, and if you're in the Soviet embassy, you're definitely a KGB person. I always get mixed feelings about that, because first it shows a lack of imagination, but also the reality was quite different. I have to say, when I was a diplomat, I was kept away from security for a long time. So you won't believe that, but we had particular people who were dealing with security, and those people were from security and agencies and intelligence services, who would oftentimes, be under the cover of good-looking, friendly, warm diplomats. That's what diplomats are supposed to be. So even when I was an episode I haven't shared with everyone, but I only do it with people like yourself who come here and make this happen. I remember we had the U.S. and the Russian embassy, Soviet embassies in Karori, Massey's Road, if you know it, has a kind of, it's called the Kremlin, because of the ugly wall that was built around. The Kremlin has a nicer surrounding, the Karori version of that. So someone threw a stone over the fence, and for embassies, especially in countries where there isn't much work to do, and New Zealand is one of those countries where I don't even know what the Russian embassy is doing here, because there isn't much, really kind of relationship. So that was a big thing. Someone threw a stone, and I raised that issue with the ambassador. I was the deputy then. I was promoted later because I dealt with security properly, and I drew his attention to that, and then our security officer was not very happy, and he complained to the ambassador and says, Rouben Azizian has nothing to do with security. I own security. I am the security officer. So since then, I think we have really evolved, a lot of us, in really realizing that security is not just about spies and guns, but it is about many other things. So in New Zealand context, to me, security starts with MBI spraying planes and making people very uncomfortable, or checking your bags. But that is the first frontier of New Zealand security. It is not really as much as we think, so much defense law or law enforcement, but it is really those aspects. So we have lots of stereotypes. So the stereotypes, many of them are a legacy of the Cold War. And so when people during the Cold War discussed security, they were probably thinking 3 or 4 particular themes. One was, of course, the great superpower conflict. So when you talk security, you talk nuclear proliferation, you talk nuclear standoff, you talk Cold War ideological standoff. That was very much what security was, and most countries had to align themselves with one or the other superpower, or try to be neutral. That was the non-aligned movement, but even that was quite vulnerable. The other theme was usually, border security, state security, and stability, especially that many countries were still in their authoritarian stage of development, and stability was very much a kind of a focus of those countries. But since then, I think we have had a number of changes and processes that have really undermined that stereotypical perception of security, and those are, in my opinion, the collapse of communism and in its classical traditional form, Marxist-Leninist version. Chinese call themselves communists, but they're not really true communists. Believe me, as a former communist, Chinese are not true communists. They are revisionist, opportunistic, and capitalistic, and nationalistic communists. We were the communists, but we lost it because we were too idealistic and not enough materialistic. So globalization and spread of technology and democratization, I think all these 3 or 4 processes have really changed our perception. So when we talk about security today, it's not just state security, we increasingly talk about human security. And that is, I think, the impact of democratization and the plurality of views. When we talk about border security, are we talking physical borders with immigration or customs, which do very little to stop cyber attacks, or do very little to stop terrorist attacks that are based on internal radicalization of particular elements in the society? So you can not let foreign terrorists come to your country, but how do you stop your internal terrorists who are born in your country and get radicalized? So all these things have changed. But speaking of change, and one would say this is getting more complex, sometimes this kind of new change brings some benefits as well. So I remember when I was in Honolulu, and we would be educating and working with a large group of senior security professionals from the Asia-Pacific region. In my seminar group, I would sometimes ask them to write down 3 key security challenges in their own country. And they would write that down, and then they would share. And in some cases, they would have similar security challenges, but they also have, different. And if you look at compare countries like Nepal and, with China or Fiji, you may appreciate that they have a different specific security environment. We're getting some security issues, right? So after they've done this homework or classwork, 3 security challenges, then I would ask them, of the 3, which one can you really take care of it within your nation? Basically, within your own means and single-handedly, or by your own through your own national capability. And the answer was almost 0. They would say all 3 from each country required some collaboration with another country or organization. So I think while we accept that security has become more challenging and more complex, and I've come across so many security professionals who look at me with certain nostalgia that the Soviet Union is not there anymore, because they would say things were much more simple. We knew who the enemy was. We don't mean you, Rouben, of course. And we had certain rules of engagement, even, right, and prevention of certain, accidents or, arms control processes. Right now, we don't really know who the enemies are. We don't know how to deal with some of the adversaries and enemies, so it's become very complex. But I think that prompts us to cooperate more, because countries are much more flexible now about their partnership. You don't have that same pressure of, are you with the United States or are you with the Soviet Union? Although we still have that a little bit, but now more between the United States and China. I really want to finish my speech earlier so that we can have some interaction. I think what, at the same time, I'm a little bit uncomfortable when we totally refocus from traditional security challenges to these new challenges and say, well, you know, the geopolitics doesn't matter anymore, and you know, the rivalries are not relevant, because I think we still have a very strong impact of you know, traditional challenges such as you know, the security dilemma concept, which some of you may be aware, but which means that when countries try to build their capacity, national capacity, which includes also security, it regularly or almost inevitably raises concerns from neighbors and others, and so we have this phenomenon still there, working against you know, trust and collaboration. We are witnessing a rise of new powers, and we don't know how to deal with that. The Chinese have come up with a new concept. They want to you know, suggest to the international community that we are not about to see a new Cold War, that relations between the United States and China should not and will not replicate the traditional Cold War formula between the United States and the Soviet Union. So they have come up with a concept of a new type of relationship between major powers, but I think there's still a lot of mistrust of what you know, China is up to. Again, a particular school of you know, realism will tell you that every emerging major powers act in the same way. So sooner or later, China, after really becoming economically more assertive, and we are seeing China becoming much more assertive, and in some ways economically expansionist, will eventually translate its economic power and capability into traditional military influence and enhancing its capabilities. Let me also say a few words maybe about New Zealand and regional issues, because one of the debates I think in New Zealand, especially when new security and intelligence legislation was being discussed, was the definition of national security. There's still, I think, being debated what is national security and what is not, and who is in charge of national security. I don't know if you paid attention, but a few days ago there was a story about a former director of the GCSB, which is the Government Security Communications Bureau, the electronic surveillance, Ian Fletcher. The story that how Ian Fletcher offered that the agency collect intelligence on foreign candidates for the WTO Director General position, which is the World Trade Organization. New Zealand candidate was Grosser, right? Minister of Trade, right? So, and the way he justified GCSB activity was the position of the director of the WTO is important for New Zealand national security. So that could mean